Hi, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, good morning.
All right, okay, we'll start with the next workshop, yeah? Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is still with us for the fourth workshop today. Hang on, sorry. I understand there's some, okay, all right. Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. All right, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is still with us for the fourth workshop today. Our first speaker for this workshop is none other than Ms. Vanessa Manhalo from School of Professional and Continuing Education, University of Hong Kong. Allow me to introduce to you a bit on Ms. Vanessa. Ms. Vanessa is a clinical scientist with the professional qualification of fellowship awarded by the Faculty of Science, Royal College of Pathologists, Australasian. She has 4 master's degrees in clinical chemistry, business administration, information system management and accounting, and 1 postgraduate diploma in medical toxicology. Ms. Vanessa is a local pioneer incorporating Sigma metrics into quality control plan to establish and analyze specific internal quality control program. She has successfully implemented many research ideas with positive outcomes in laboratory management, and she has presented at many international conferences to inspire worldwide medical laboratory professionals. She is currently holding teaching positions in the Faculty of Medicine, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the College of Life Sciences and Technology, the University of Hong Kong School of Professional and Continuing Education. This morning, Ms. Vanessa will give a lecture on clinically applicable LJ control chart achieved high quality medical testing laboratory. Over to you, Ms. Vanessa.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Malaysian Association of Clinical Biochemists and Chemopharm for inviting me to share with you my experience of establishing a high-quality medical testing laboratory with clinically applicable Levy-Jennings control charts. Medical testing laboratories play a very important bridging role between doctors and patients. Laboratory communicates with doctors by millions and trillions of clinical reports. Text and numbers printed on these reports have no meaning at all unless it is clinically indicated. Therefore, laboratories are obliged to ensure all test results reported are fit for clinical applications. In order to do so, laboratories have to ensure all quality-related activities are fit for clinical applications. I believe you should agree with me that errors are found everywhere, no exception in medical testing laboratories. Therefore, laboratories need a quality control system to detect error. However, it might be too late when error was detected because wrong results might have been reported and clinical management of patients might have been affected. So laboratory needs to act proactively to prevent error occurrence by introducing a quality assurance system. Nevertheless, no matter how powerful the quality control and quality assurance programs are, they were established by a group of people working under the same roof. Since they already got used to the practices and daily working procedures, they might not be sensitive enough to spot something unusual. Therefore, laboratory needs enlightening by objective eyes from outsiders. That's the reason why laboratory joined external quality assurance program. Quality control, internal and external quality assurance program made up a quality management system which is required for ISO 15189 medical testing laboratory accreditation. Now, let's review quality control for error detection. First is systematic error. It's associated with poor accuracy and can be presented in forms of bias. It has definite cause and is reproducible. In terms of method selection, laboratory can adopt either the best practice or state-of-the-art technology to avoid systematic error. For example, creatinine level determination in blood and urine, the best practice is isotope dilution mass spectrometry, IDMS. However, it is not applicable in daily routine operation due to cost, expertise, and turnaround time requirements. Although Jeffreys reaction is widely adopted in daily routine operation, it is subjected to variety of analytical interference. In order to optimize the performance, manufacturers of Jeffreys reagents standardize the method against IDMS or a primary reference material. While state-of-the-art technology for creatinine level determination in blood and urine is enzymatic method because of its specificity. Apart from method selection, laboratory handle bias, for example due to aged lamp, reagent deterioration, or after repair by analytical calibration. The second type of laboratory error is random error. It is represented by poor precision, associated with non-specific cause. It is not reproducible and can happen anytime. Most importantly, it is not avoidable. Relatively speaking, in daily operation, laboratory faces higher risk of random than systematic error. To be exact, it is risk of analytical random error that the laboratory is required to manage every day. With internal quality control materials, laboratory manage risk of analytical random error through a cycle of 4 processes: identify, assess, control, and monitor. Individual analyte performance are presented in an LJ control chart timely. Indeed, it is not restricted to clinical chemistry laboratory, but apply to all medical testing laboratories which issue reports based on numerical results. For example, hematology laboratory, cell count and red cell indexes are reported numerically. Another example is allergy testing RAS score 0 to 6 determined by allergen-specific IgE level. Higher the RAS score, the more significance of allergic reaction is expected. Furthermore is viral serology testing, such as HIV and hepatitis serology. Reporting of reactive or positive and non-reactive or negative depending on the cutoff of numerical value. To maximize the error detection power of the LJ control chart, laboratories apply multi-QC rules. 1.2s is warning rule: no action will be taken, but observe and monitor. 2.2s, 4.1s, and 10x are rejection rules for bias. 1.3s and R4S are rejection rules for imprecision. Understanding that bias is avoidable, therefore, the key role of LGA control chart in daily operation is to identify imprecision. To maximize error detection power of the multi-QC rules, the fundamental requirement is an appropriate LGA control chart. Appropriate means minimal false acceptance and false rejection rates. Now, let's adopt the cycle of what, why, and how to understand the impact of false acceptance and false rejection. False acceptance means when the system accepts a wrong result, and it is statistically presented to be the type 2 error. Well, false rejection means when the system rejects a valid result, and the statistical interpretation is type 1 error. Then, why false acceptance and false rejection affect the appropriateness of an LGA control chart? LGA control charts with high false acceptance rate associate with inappropriately large standard deviation and coefficient of variation. So the chart always presents with good analytical performance, but actually not. The situation significantly reduces the strength of error detection. Wrong test results might likely be reported unintentionally. On the other hand, LG control chart with high false rejection rate associates with inappropriately small standard deviation and coefficient of variation. So the chart always presents with bad analytical performance, but actually not. The situation also indicates an inappropriate power of error detection. However, the good news is correct test results must be reported. Nevertheless, the laboratory has to conduct lots of invaluable actions to pay off, such as unnecessary troubleshooting and unnecessary repeated internal QC rerun. This might result in unnecessary additional dumping of plastics to pollute our planet. Inappropriately presents the LGA control chart with the message of poor analytical performance, which indeed had no problem at all, for laboratory which go for calibration without thorough investigation can do more harm than good, because this action might even complicate the situation. During troubleshooting, in-house service might have to be suspended and referred out. This can prolong the turnaround time. Some labile analytes might not be analyzed due to prolonged inappropriate storage. Time-dependent analyte level determination might be significantly affected because it is impossible to take sample again to represent the patient's initial clinical situation. For example, cardiac troponin level to diagnose myocardial infarction, or therapeutic drug monitoring of immunosuppressant drug for organ transplantation patients. Clinical management might be significantly influenced. Apart from all these analytical considerations, laboratory should not overlook one crucial negative impact related to high false rejection rates, that is, staff issue. Every day, unnecessary in-QC rerun become part of their routine. As times go by, they would doubt quality of the analytical system. Holding patient sample analysis until internal QC fell into range, might result in non-stop calling from doctors and nurses chasing for laboratory reports. This could generate anger, frustration, and emotional stress to staff. Gradually, without any constructive action by the management, staff would no longer trust the management and lost loyalty to the organization. Therefore, an LJ control chart with appropriate standard deviation and coefficients of variation is a key of success to not only the effectiveness of internal quality control system for error detection, but also the laboratory management. So, how can laboratory establish an LJ control chart with appropriate standard deviation and coefficients of variation? It is easy for laboratory to determine analytical SD and CV through run-in process, but it is very difficult for the laboratory to determine the appropriateness. It was clear now that to ensure all test results reported are fit for clinical applications, laboratory have to ensure all quality-related activities are fit for clinical applications. Indeed, analytical SD and CV are not an isolated figure, but clinically related to analyte dependent within subject or intra-individual biological variation. This is what we call analyte-specific analytical goal. Therefore, analytical SD and CV determined by run-in process should be related to analyte dependent within subject or intra-individual biological variation. So, the meaning of an appropriate LJ control chart is the one with clinically applicable standard deviation and coefficients of variation. Indeed, managing imprecision, that is analytical SD and CV, laboratory can involve in two ways, proactively and clinically. First is to assess clinical appropriateness of current running precision status, and second is to establish risk management and control measure to reduce the imprecision reasonably and appropriately to fit clinical need. Imprecision is composed of two components, analytical and biological. Analytical refers to uncertainty of measurements, while biological include intra and inter-individual biological variation. Biological variation is a natural variability in a laboratory parameter due to physiological differences or homeostatic changes within the same subject and among different subjects over time. Intra-individual means differences in the same subject over time due to diurnal cycles, physiological variabilities, other rhythms, biological repair mechanism, etc. Inter-individual refers to differences among subjects due to variation in diet, genetics, living environment, or immune status, etc. Biological variation determines maximum analytical imprecision allowable. That is, analyte-specific analytical goal or level of clinical fitness. Therefore, biological imprecision determines the analytical imprecision allowable. There are 3 levels of analytical goals. Each is referred to different fraction of intra-individual biological variation. Optimal, desirable, and minimal is no more than a quarter, half, and 3/4 of the intra-individual biological variation, respectively. Now, let's elaborate with 3 analytes associated with vastly different biological variation. Glucose, intra-individual biological variation 4.5%, corresponding optimal, desirable, and minimum analytical goals are 1.13%, 2.25%, and 3.38% respectively. Then, which level should we take? Our CPA-QAP, a renowned proficiency testing provider, can give us the answer. Analytical goal is one of the factors for the establishment of total error allowable or allowable limit of performance. Desirable was recommended for glucose. So, laboratory adopt desirable analytical goal for LJ control chart setup of glucose. Daily internal QC running CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 2.25%, while free CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 6.75%. Now, let's take a look of sodium. Intra-individual biological variation 0.6%. Our CPA-QAP recommend minimum analytical goal, which is 0.45%. So, daily internal QC running CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 0.45%. Free CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 1.35%. How about direct bilirubin with intra-individual biological variation 36.8%? Our CPA-QAP recommend optimal analytical goal, so daily internal QC running CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 9.2%. Free CV maximum allowable cannot exceed 27.6%. Now, let me tell you a story which happened 30 years ago. By then, I was just graduated from the university and was employed by my first medical testing laboratory. On my report duty day, the laboratory manager greeted me and said, "Our laboratory performance was excellent. The lowest CV that we could achieve was 3%. At that moment, I thought, whoa, 3%, how difficult it was. I was so glad and fortunate to be able to work in such a high-quality standard laboratory." Is it still true now? The answer is maybe or may not be. 3% is borderline for glucose, but excellent for direct bilirubin, while for sodium, the laboratory performed badly. So, there is no the best SD and CV fits for all analytes. Clinically applicable SD and CV determines appropriateness of the LJ control charts with minimal false acceptance and false rejection rates. By doing so, the laboratory can tailor-make an analyte-specific, focused, and targeted quality control system which is clinically applicable. Since The concept of clinically applicable LJ control chart is a breakthrough associated with totally new concepts, and it seems like to violate the traditional and conventional way to set up an LJ control chart. Therefore, the laboratory needs thorough and repeated assessment, evaluation, and quantification of the pros and cons. By that time, the Sigma metric incorporated internal quality control plan was adopted. Sigma value was determined with the equation of total error allowable, TEA, minus bias and divided by coefficients of variation. TEA was referenced to ACBRLM QAP allowable limit of performance, which is clinically related to intra-individual biological variation. Bias was ignored because once identified, laboratory should have already settled. Coefficients of variation was determined from daily internal QC performance presented on a clinically applicable LJ control chart. Since the only parameters for calculating sigma, TEA, and CV are both clinically related, so sigma value becomes clinically associated automatically. Therefore, we apply sigma as a performance indicator to review the overall performance of the laboratory after adopting clinically applicable LJ control charts. Before sharing our report card, let's know more about how sigma can be used as a performance indicator. Sigma value enable the laboratory to identify the bad-performing analytes clinically. Was this laboratory's analytical performance of sodium and direct bilirubin equally well with CV 2%? The answer can be yes or no. Indeed, sigma value could give the laboratory a concrete answer. Direct bilirubin was well performed with sigma value 10, but sodium was unsatisfactory with sigma value only 1. Laboratory with sigma value below 3 analytical performance should stop service and conduct troubleshooting right away. The setup also enabled the laboratory to relate assay required performance clinically. Laboratory A and B performed differently for direct bilirubin. Did Lab A perform better than Lab B because of achieving smaller CV? The answer can be yes or no. Based on the criteria that sigma value greater than or equal to 6 indicates good performance, Lab A and B performed equally well for direct bilirubin. Reason why Lab A attained much lower CV was due to extra work done by the laboratory, which might not be necessary. So, how did the laboratory perform? Just applying for 1 year, the laboratory achieved an increased number of analytes with high sigma value, and on the other hand, a significant decrease in number of analytes with low sigma value. Regarding the RCPA-QAP performance, the laboratory achieved uprising KPI year after year. So, the breakthrough concept of clinically applicable LJ control chart was proven to be successful. Apart from playing the role as performance indicator, clinically applicable sigma metric can work with the clinically applicable LJ control chart to establish a clinically associated quality improvement plan. First is to set up clear, achievable, and realistic targets. Let's take an example of glucose. Desirable is the recommended analytical goal by the ACBRLM, but together with the total error allowable of 8%, the sigma achieved is only 4. It is indeed a little bit risky, because if any uncertain events happened in the laboratory, the sigma value can easily drop down to 3. Therefore, the laboratory think about whether it is possible to boost up the analytical goal up to one level higher, that is the optimal, in order to achieve the target value of sigma 6. Well, this is within the capacity of the laboratory. Then how about sodium? Minimum is the lowest analytical goal to be recommended by the ACBRLM. With the total error allowable of 2, by calculation, sigma is very, very promising with value 5. However, is it realistic in the daily operation? I can tell you the answer is no. Among all the chemistry analytes that the laboratory has enrolled for the general chemistry program of the RCPA, sodium and chloride with the 2 analytes can only achieve a sigma result of 3. At that time, the laboratory worried a lot because we did not know whether we are really performing so bad and in what way that the laboratory can do better. To resolve our worry and look up for positive solution, we reviewed peers' performance according to the periodic summary data provided by ACBRLM. We assess the peers' performance according to the CV, calculate the sigma in order to identify the benchmark. We note that peers' sigma value were 2, while our laboratory sigma value was 3, so our laboratory performed even better than the peers. So that means sodium is a very difficult analyte to get a high sigma value. Up to this stage, we are happy to tell that a clinically applicable LJ control chart together with a clinically applicable sigma metric incorporated internal quality control plan enable the laboratory to establish a focused and targeted quality control system. Furthermore, the setup facilitates the laboratory to allocate resources wisely and reasonably. No more or minimal unnecessary troubleshooting and unnecessary QC rerun. Wise resources allocation enable the laboratory to do the right thing for the right reason all the time. More attention and effort were paid in bad-performing analytes such as sodium by introducing more stringent preventive maintenance. More effort were placed in daily services and maintenance such as regular electrode replacement. No more unnecessary dumping of plasticware to pollute our planet. The laboratory become environmental friendly, and we are happy to contribute constructively to save our beautiful planet. Service pledge of turnaround time was well fulfilled. Staff work happily, enjoyable, and love the laboratory and the management. A constructive teamwork was established. After a year of implementation, the laboratory got positive remark from professional organization due to attainment of high scoring in the key performance indicator. The laboratory was categorized by the RCPA QAP as good performing laboratory. In subsequent year, because of past records and well-documented evidence of good analytical performance in the RCPA QAP, the laboratory was selected to be one of the reference institutes worldwide for target value setup of 5 analytes. 5 analytes include phosphates, protein, lactates, urea, and glucose. According to my understanding, this is still the local record. Remember glucose? Because the laboratory realized its own capacity, which is able to boost up the analytical one level higher, the laboratory can achieve a 6 sigma quality glucose performance. Since year 2010, I have non-stop opportunities to share my experience of establishing a high standard medical testing laboratory with clinically applicable LJ control charts and sigma metric incorporated internal quality control plan. In year 2019, in cooperation with BioRed, an Asia-Pacific Academy conference was launched as a webinar in which these 2 topics were included. Ladies and gentlemen, being a scientist, we need to think out of the box. Clinically applicable LJ control charts and incorporating sigma metric in internal quality control program is not only restricted to routine running laboratory, but was proven constructive to improve quality of the point of care glucose testing service. Coming few slides, a snapshot of my presentation in last year MACB conference about the work done. Exactly the same concept was applied to set up an analyte-specific, focused and target quality control system for point-of-care testing glucose service according to RCPA QAP recommendation. Due to the laboratory technological capability and professionalism, an optimal analytical goal was achieved in laboratory glucose testing. However, due to large uncertainty of measurements in the point-of-care glucose testing service, only desirable analytical goal was attained. This indicates how analytical goal or level of clinical fitness can be applied as required. There is no one rule for all. After running the system for 5 years, performance was reviewed. Sigma value of InQC was one of the performance indicators. According to low internal QC, with glucose level at around 3.5 millimole per liter, an average sigma value of 5.9 was achieved, with 95% confidence interval ranged from 5 to 9. Corresponding error rates was between 0.00036 to 0.00050%. While depth of high internal QC with glucose level at around 16 millimole per liter. An average sigma value of 7.9 was attained, with 95% confidence interval ranged from 6 to 12. Corresponding error rate was lower than 0.00036%. A high-quality point-of-care glucose testing service was achieved. These achievements have introduced significant positive impact in the frontline hospital service. Every patient seeking for medical consultation in the emergency department is requested to have spot glucose testing by finger prick at the nurse triage station. Doctors base on the spot glucose results to decide the subsequent clinical management, for example, admission, observation, or discharge. In the ward, doctor adjusted insulin dosage for DM patients rely on finger prick blood glucose results determined by point-of-care glucose testing device. Therefore, medical testing laboratory played a crucial and collaborative role with frontline healthcare providers to exercise and ensure all quality-related activities conducted by the point-of-care glucose testing service are fit for clinical application. In summary, clinically applicable LJ control charts together with sigma-metric incorporated internal quality control plan enable me to establish a high-quality medical testing laboratory and point-of-care glucose testing service, so as to achieve the ultimate goal of providing the best patient care. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, Miss Vanessa. Can you hear me? Miss Vanessa, can you hear me? I think your mic is mute.
Yes. Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you for very interesting and I would say a continuously ongoing topic with regards to quality management. We are
Thank
now
you very
open
much.
for, right. We have a lot of questions for you. For those who are would like to ask any questions, you can write in the chat box, chat window, and I will read it out for you. All right. We'll start with the first question.
Okay.
In your opinion, what is the appropriate allowable imprecision, allowable bias, and total allowable error for therapeutic drugs such as digoxin and vancomycin?
Okay. So for these questions, I'm sure I'm not the specialist to answer. So my recommendation is that if the laboratory join the RCPA QAP and try to take a look what's the information provided by this professional organization.
Right.
Okay, because according to my experience for therapeutic drug, we might take different concepts as those analytes such as glucose or sodium, because these analytes, they have a different degree of the biological variation. But for therapeutic drug, it has involved a more complicated kind of kinetic kind of the element. So it might not be as simple as that of glucose or sodium or direct bilirubin.
Right. Okay. Thank you. The second question is, Can you explain why bias is not included in the sigma metric calculation?
Okay. So this is nearly a compulsory question to be asked in all my talks previously. So although according to Dr. James Westgard, sigma equals to total error allowable minus bias divided by CV. However, as I said, when the laboratory come across bias, for example, showing some downward drift or upward drift according to the internal QC performance, as shown in the LG chart, the laboratory must take action immediately. The laboratory will not wait for the bias to take for a long period of time. So, for simplicity, in fact, bias should have been tackled immediately. The laboratory cannot do a lot to handle bias in terms of method selection. So to take it simple, I will take off bias. And I think the contribution of bias, if the laboratory manage inaccuracy appropriately and reasonably in the daily operation, bias will contribute minimally in the sigma calculation. So this is my own personal way of handling sigma by taking out bias. This is my personal practice and my personal belief.
Right, thank you. I think you have mentioned this in your last conference during the MACB conference.
Yes. Yes.
Right. All right, thank you. The next question is, what is your opinion for slow-moving reagent that tend to shift showing biased performance?
Indeed, what is the exact meaning of slow-moving reagents? Is it slow consumption?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yes, this is one issue that I have to handle carefully in my previous working laboratory, because the size or the package size of the reagent, that is the number of tests to be incorporated, is not controlled by the laboratory. Even the laboratory chose the smallest package if the workload cannot cope with, but the service has to be put in the laboratory due to some clinical need or the doctor's requirements, then laboratory have to manage in two ways. First, because every reagent has its onboard stability. It is not the expiration date being printed on the reagent box, but the onboard stability. Even though the reagent has not been expired, but as long as the onboard stability is expired, either the laboratory has to recalibrate or has to throw away. So in terms of the overall laboratory management, a certain kind of the losses due to early discard of these slow consumption reagents has to be put into consideration. So the way to solve the bias performance, only way can do is to recalibrate or to take the reagent out if it is not going to provide the service. For example, some drug measurements, my experiences, some anti-epileptic drug, the consumption rate is very low, but the service is not to be done daily. So we have a kind of the reagent management, the inventory management is we will take out the reagent and then reload on the day that the service will be provided. So by doing that, you can slow down the deterioration of the reagent due to onboard. Because the onboard temperature capacity, the temperature in the reagent compartment, it is not kept at 4 degrees Celsius. Usually it's around 10 maybe to 20. So the reagent will tend to deteriorate much faster than when it is put in the refrigerator. In nowadays clinical chemistry laboratory, the reagent management system provided by the manufacturer is very flexible and with high intelligence, because whenever you scan the reagent, each reagent has its individualized barcode. So it will count the onboard stability only based on the day. that the reagent on board in the instrument or in the analyzer. So this is my experience when handling those slow consumption reagents according to one particular manufacturers. So this is my personal recommendation.
Right, thank you. Miss Adila, I hope that answers your question. The next question is, how do you obtain daily CV? Is it cumulative CV? Can you elaborate more on this?
Yes, this is the cumulative CV, because the LJ charts will show at least 20 to maybe 60 number of the QC performance. It depends on the laboratory setup. So it should be cumulative. And then what is the period to be included? Then it is determined by the laboratory. The longer it will represent a more realistic and more reasonable performance, because it will involve multiple variables taken. For example, after repair, after lamp changing, after changing kits of the reagents, all kinds of things. These variabilities are the real and the actual realistic reliability to be shown of the precision performance of the analyte. So I would recommend, really, it should be the cumulative, but the duration, it depends on the laboratory practice.
Right. The next question is, how did you boost the 4 sigma to 6 sigma for glucose? Did you obtain a different method?
No, actually, this is not deliberately to boost up the sigma. At the very starting at the very beginning, when we take the concept of determine sigma of the performance, we follow the basic rules. That is to calculate the analytical goal, and based on this information to determine what is the recommended CV or what is the recommended standard deviation according to the RCPA-QAP analytical goal recommendation. So at that time, the RCPA-QAP recommends it is the second level, that is the desirable. However, when we look up the performance of our glucose, indeed, we perform much better than the RCPA recommendation of the precision. And another reason is that because we train up our staff, we do a lot of analyzer kind of the maintenance. So the analytical performance improve not only for glucose, but for the practice of the staff, how the staff will handle the reagents, how can they, in the past, staff use reagents with a very bad practice. They will not use according to the lot because there is a lot of some kind of practice-related variability. So after set up a very systematic inventory management system, which allow the staff to use the reagent as required, then a lot of analytical imprecision can be avoided and can be minimized. So we boost up the sigma performance. It is not we. Indeed, we do a lot of background work. The inventory management, the staff training, we did not do anything about the performance of the analyte because it is the reagent built-in performance by the manufacturing company. What we have done is to do all kinds of the lab management work, train up the staff to set up a very neat and tidy inventory management system, re-educate the staff to what is the concept of quality, and to let them to take up a good practice, all these kinds of the groundwork. So this is what we have done. And we also review our performance, seeing that we can do better than the desirable analytical goal as recommended by the RCPA. So after reviewing for a certain period of time, it takes about 3 months for reviewing the performance that is based on the cumulative CV performance, then we decided to adopt the optimal analytical goal without any difficulties. Then we take it as our routine practice. So this is our experience sharing. So for laboratory who would take up this Sigma concept as one of the quality kind of elements in your laboratory QC system, I will recommend you to review your cumulative CV periodically. For example, every 6 months, and then maybe the laboratory run very stably without any significant changes within 6 months, then you can keep 6 months. Otherwise, you can shorten to 3 months, or you can lengthen to a year. Because laboratory need to calculate the uncertainty of measurements at least annually. So based on this process, you can do one job and fit for two purposes. One is to calculate your sigma. Second is you determine your uncertainty of measurements. Okay?
All right, I agree. I agree that training is plays a big role
Yes.
in awareness in order to boost from 4 Sigma to 6 Sigma.
Yes.
All
Thank you
right,
very
next
much.
question. Next question. Have you heard about intelligent quality management that has been introduced by the GEM Premier family? What is your opinion on this advancement of QC monitoring where there are no LJ chart to monitor the imposition?
Okay. Oh, so sorry about that. I have not heard about this germ premium family. Maybe after this conference, I can look up more information about this.
Right, okay. Besides clinical
have-
chemistry tests, sorry.
Yes, but I have one experience would like to share. In my talk, I focus on using the internal QC to be the cumulative CV and a precision performance of the laboratory overall analytical performance. But there is one important concept that I have introduced is using patient sample as a kind of the QC. That is running patient sample, for example, for the sodium, for certain periods of time. The selection of those patients should be, for example, some normal patient, and then use the patient sample as another QC element for reviewing the performance. Why? Because when we do internal QC, we do at a certain time interval. But what's happened in between this interval? Has anything happened? For example, some clot, some minor fibrin clot the tubing, then this will affect the performance of the fluency of the reagent flow into the for measuring the patient sample. So this cannot be detected by the time interval QC. But when we have so-called the running QC concept with the patient sample, then this kind of the quality control can be managed timely every minute and every second.
Right. Right. The next question is, if there is a shift in the QC mean due to reagent lot variation, should lab establish a new mean and maintain the CV? I think you've answered this in the previous question.
Not that specific to change of reagent lot variation. I think the laboratory has to adopt a practice is when the laboratory ready to change a reagent lot, they have to carry out the run-in process. That means have to overlap when you're using the old lot, then you have to run the new lot at the same time. Because when you doing this practice, you ensure the system is under a well control. So the performance being reflected by the new reagent lots will indicate the actual analytical performance. So this has to have an overlapping, the run-in, the overlapping period. So for CV, the answer is yes, because when you adopt, for example, the desirable or the minimal or the optimal analytical goal, this should be kept the same, even though you change QC lot and also when you change reagent lot. Otherwise, this kind of the concept of precision will have no meaning at all. But the mean, according to the performance, for example, for immunoassay, we understand that the antibody lot, the lot of the antibody can change variably, has a very large variation. So under this situation, the mean can be adjusted reasonably after the run-in process. But the CV, that means the precision, my personal recommendation is has to be kept.
Right, thank you. This is a very mostly sought after topic, so we have a lot of questions to ask. I have to slot in my question.
Okay.
What is what is your opinion in on the challenges faced by clinical research labs to also achieve high quality research lab? Are they similar to clinical medical laboratory?
Okay. So research lab, what are those service provided by the research lab? It's the same as the general clinical chemistry or some molecular genetic.
Mostly,
Yes,
yes.
most clinical chemistry. Oh, then it should based on the same concept and also apply to the same requirements, because analyte is analyte, sodium is sodium. It has no difference between the service lab or the research lab.
Right. So probably similar challenges.
Yes,
different resources,
similar
yeah.
challenges. Yes, yes. But
Right,
I
right.
think up to now, it is no longer a big challenge. I think it is no longer a big
There's so
challenge.
many. Right. It's a hard topic, so there are a lot of questions that, you know, I think participants can email you if they have further
Yes,
questions regarding this.
definitely.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Vanessa.
Thank you very much.